Welcome to the show, All Things Writing. I am your host, Brian the Writer. Let me take you on a journey through my writing life and introduce you to some of the amazing talent that exists in the writing world. Whether you are looking for a little advice or just to catch an interesting interview, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All Things Writing starts now. Welcome to the show, my good friends. I am, as you know, Brian the Writer. I am here today with a bit of a fun thing. We don't do this too often because normally, A, I'm a little bit more organized, and B, I'm a little bit more organized, and C, I'm not as disorganized as I am this week, but that's okay because right now I have for you on the show Sirrah Medeiros, who is not only excellent writer with a new book coming out. She appeared with me in The Dark Corners of the Old Dominion. Some of you are going to remember me talking about that. She has this wonderful poem called The Chesapeake Bait and Hook, which, as I've talked about before, I was actually on the selection committee for the book. So it was great fun going through all the different things. But the reason I bring up Dark Corners of the Old Dominion is because I want to talk about, we're going to talk about something we don't normally talk about, lovely anthologies. Because as everybody knows, I'm not a huge short story person because I'm lame and short stories are just an intense amount of work. They're actually way harder to write than a novel, in my humble opinion. People who write short stories disagree with me on that one, but we can go back and forth on that forever. But anyway, welcome to the show, Sirrah.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate it.
So before we dive into too many of the details, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've kind of retired from regular employment about 3 years ago. I started out back in 2009 or so writing creatively and got published in 3 or 4, 5, 6, maybe anthologies. I lost track. That was a long time ago. And it's funny because that creative writing actually got me into back into defense work by my stories and my articles that I had been writing about the local area. And we were running 2 households at the time. So I went back to regular work and 10 or 12 years later decided that I kind of had enough of that again and wanted to get back to creative writing. So got a lot of lessons learned in that environment to do full, formatting and putting everything together from front to back. And I'm now utilizing that in my creative writing again, that I've always had a passion for, and get to do it now on my time and my schedule. So it's fun.
So you and I are members of the Horror Writers Association, the Virginia chapter. Question, have you always been a horror fan? How did you get into that?
Oh, I've always been a horror fan. I read a lot of disturbing tales growing up, probably. The youngest of 7, there wasn't a whole lot of parental oversight over...
No, it diminishes with each child.
That's right. So I don't really know. I just remember I could read anything, really. And I was reading Clive Barker in, towards the end of high school, and Shirley Jackson and Anne Rice, who I, of course, have loved her work.
Sure.
But, I was always a big horror movie fan. And so writing now in that genre has been a lot of fun, because out of probably all movies, I will pick a horror movie over anything else. So I love writing horror. I also like to write crime, thriller, that type of stuff, dark fantasy. But to me, there's the crime thriller, even though the genres, when you're publishing, kind of separate them. There's just a lot of horror and crime thrillers as well. So.
Agreed. Yeah, I think, and I always say, like, if you think about sci-fi, like spaceships and that kind of thing, the reality is there's almost this horror element to it, because you're out in the dark vacuum of space. Anything could go wrong, and usually anything does. Otherwise, why would you be writing it in the first place?
Well, right. I think horror, I don't know why, as a mainstream thing, it kind of, it doesn't get the same level of recognition as some other
I know.
genres, I think. But honestly, horror is in so many of the other ones. To me, it should be a primary, and then all of these others be kind of a subset to the horror genre itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think horror doesn't get the attention or the love that it necessarily deserves.
Agreed.
It's not easy writing good horror. Have you always been a short story person?
Um, no, that was kind of a fluke. I was in a group. This is when I was back into writing back in 2009 and 2010. We had a group called Vicious Writers. It was an online group that was, I don't know how many, 200, 300 people all around the world. And we wound up just kind of putting together a few contests. And I threw my hat in the ring. I was writing a lot of poetry at the time. I think when we talked last, you had grabbed my old poetry book, which is no longer published, but I took that down. But I actually prefer longer work myself.
Yeah.
So I don't put a lot of submissions. I don't do a lot of submission calls myself. If I've found that if I get kind of caught up in that, I'm a very focused person. So if I start looking at submission calls, I'll stop probably working on my longer works. So I
Yeah.
make a conscious effort of when I'm writing that I'm first focusing on what I want to do. And then if I have a gap, then I might go look at a submission call. But
Yeah.
I don't do them very often.
I'm with you. I don't do a ton of subs, mostly because I have a project in front of me and it's a project that I want to get done, and I don't tend to deviate off that too much, although I do get distracted from time to time. However, the whole short story concept and idea, you have a collection of short stories coming out, correct?
Well, we have the anthology that's a charity anthology as well as the Dark Corners of the Old Dominion. I've put together a little passion project that was, it was actually instigated by the Horror Writers Association. So I blame them, first of all, for getting this idea stuck in my head.
You're welcome.
Yes, there you go. November of 2022, I was interviewed for their Veterans in Horror Spotlight. Mm-hmm. And one of those questions that was asked was other horror writers that I know that are veterans. You know, who do you recommend? Paraphrasing the question. And I rattled off in my head probably 4 to 6. I think I actually answered the question with about 4 guys. Yeah. But I didn't know one other woman who was writing horror who was a veteran. So that bothered me. And now I had a 10-year gap. I really wasn't paying attention to who was moving around in the horror genre. I was getting back into things. The industry had changed a lot in the decade that I had not been writing. So a lot of that is on me as well. But the question still stuck with me and bothered me enough that 4 months later, I decided that I would dig into this a little bit more. And during that, I noticed that there were 3 or 4 other publishers who had put the calls out, did open submission calls for women veterans to do horror anthologies, but none of those had made it to publication. So that continued to irritate me. And I think just a few weeks after that, doing all of that research, probably 5 or 6, 7 years back, and nothing had happened with all of that effort that these other folks had put out there. So I was just bound and determined to make sure that this anthology got put together, and that I found these other women writing horror. And a lot of people helped me do that, find women to invite, and as well as put the open call out.
Let me ask, so you mentioned that there were other efforts out there, but those other efforts did not amount to anything.
Correct.
Is there a reason why? Were you able to find out what the, I mean, you know as well as I do, sometimes these projects come together and the people don't know what they're taking on and they go, oh my God, this is a lot of work. So
correct.
Was there a reason?
I think there were 4 publishing houses. Out of those 4, I could only find 2 that were still working. So
Oh, okay.
sometime throughout that time frame, they had closed up shop for whatever
Yeah.
reason. I don't really know. I
Yeah.
didn't dig into it. Past my goal was to find out who had published women veterans. And then the other two, I assume that they either did not publicize enough to get enough submissions. I can only guess, but
Okay.
the other two houses are still out there,
Hmm.
but they just did not publish anything based off of those open calls.
Uh, so how many people did you, I mean, when you put out your calls, you're like, hey,
Right.
looking for women veteran who write horrors. What was your response?
So I had about 4 dozen submissions,
Wow.
which is not very much, but I through all of this research, I've kind of come to the determination that women veterans, military veterans, who write horror or are willing to write horror, because we did have a few fresh voices in that group that made it to publication. Um,
Hmm.
that we're probably the smallest pool within the horror writing community. I really don't know of anybody else with that far of an, going down into the weeds as a subgroup of the community. And then out of those, we had 21 authors, I believe it is. 19 authors. I have to look at my notes now. But we have 26, I think 19 authors. We had, 19 short stories, 7 poems out of 21 authors. So we had a few
Okay.
that wrote a short story and a poem for us. And then we have a
Okay.
couple of new folks that wrote poetry.
Hmm.
So it was, but I had to do a couple of extensions to really get the word
Hmm.
out. And I publicized through, I'm a lifetime member of the Marine Corps, the Women Marines Association.
Hmm.
So I publicized there. I had some other folks went through their organizations for the Army and the Navy. I went through a couple of organizations, I can't think of it off the top of my mind, that do kind of writing workshops with veterans
Okay.
as a kind of therapy.
Hmm.
I can't think
Yeah.
of their names off the top of my head, but I did quite a bit of trying to get the word out to folks. And
Yeah.
it took a while. It took a while.
Yeah. I know there are, it's interesting. We think about the therapeutic qualities of writing. I know that through my own writing and my own personal past traumas and whatnot that I've talked about on the show before, writing is a very therapeutic tool to be
Absolutely.
used, and I think women, especially women combat vets, have a very hard time. Men, we have a hard enough time expressing our feelings because we're not supposed to. But what do you do when you come
Right.
home and you're mommy and you've got these other things to do and you've got to go to work and I think we put too much pressure on ourselves, generally speaking, as human beings.
Well, you touched on a big point as far as women veterans. They do. They're nurturers by definition. Society's definition of them. They have to switch on and off. They're part of
Mhm.
this big network, mostly men, that they're around all day long. And in
Yeah.
combat or just here, stateside, whatever,
Sure.
back at the station. But then they've got to go home and they've got to switch that back on. They've got families to take care of. Usually, they're taking care of more of the home
Yeah.
responsibilities, and it's a lot on them. And I talk about that in the introduction to the Haunted Zone, and then also this is a charity anthology. It supports the women veterans programs at the National Veterans Foundation. So
Nice.
Shad Mashad, who is the founder and president of National Veterans Foundation, wrote the afterword, and he talks a lot
Mhm.
about trauma and
Mhm.
how he's a Vietnam vet, and how from that time until now, the story of women either involved in combat or as nurses coming, dealing with all of the wounded,
Mhm.
they were originally not considered to have any trauma.
Mhm.
And yet he saw it all firsthand. and he was a psych officer, I believe. And so he's dedicated his entire life since then to helping not only veterans from that time, but women veterans, and how our roles have changed, and now we're in combat as well, and the trauma that goes along with that for combat. But then women also deal with sexual assaults and abuse, and either at work or on the home front, and they're still having to carry on and do their job. Yeah. So there is a lot of trauma involved. And quite a few of the stories that we have in the anthology touch on those. They're touched on lightly. There's nothing that's too difficult. I think that we needed a kind of a trigger warning, content warning. But there are topics of domestic violence and abuse and loss. The body takes on a lot of, a heavy toll. And, women lose pregnancies, they lose children, there's all kinds of things that happen that are unique to their experience.
Yeah. And one of the things that, as a veteran myself, one of the things that people I never did anything cool. I was never in combat. I was always a strategic analyst. So I never had any of those cool experiences. And
hey, I'm old. They didn't even let you deploy back when I was in. So,
Well, so what's interesting is all the combat vets I talked to, they're like, you didn't miss anything, believe me. But the thing that that I guess civilians who've never served don't realize is that trauma, that those impacts, those things that happen to you stay with you and they don't go away. I have a friend who does, we play video games together, and it's very therapeutic for him. And he saw some actual pretty bad combat, but that doesn't go away.
No,
that doesn't go away. So putting the anthology together, what is, okay, walk me through this. You have these subs. Of course, I did it for Dark Corners, but you get these subs, then what happens next?
Well, so I did some great networking, and people just came and helped me out. It really was kind of a shot in the dark. I mean, I knew what I could put together, but I needed to find others that could help me find other women veterans. Pamela Kinney, I found out, was a veteran, and of course, she's in our Virginia chapter of the HWA. So she gave me some names, and I reached out and I contacted those ladies right away. I went to AuthorCon here in Williamsburg, Virginia last April, just for a few hours, and Red Lagoo was there. And I was asking her about any artists. What I really wanted to do was to make sure that everybody that was involved in the creation of this, in every aspect, was a woman military veteran. So she introduced me to Christina Osborne, who wound up being the designer for both of our paperback and our hardcover.
Cool.
So yeah, she was fabulous. I was just really pleased to connect with her. And then, so then I had met Jen Moffitt, is a Marine Corps veteran, and she is, I think, a moderator for the Women Marines Association page on Facebook, and she connected me to our interior illustrator, Elise McKelvey, who is a combat artist. She was in the Marine Corps for a while, and as a combat artist, she was in station. Just you'll have to check out some of her artwork. It's inkstick art, and she does a lot of memorial artwork now. She's done portraits of the Commandant of the Marine Corps. She's probably done other services. She's very well known in the military art world side. So she put together 10 interior illustrations for us, and just phenomenal work. So it was a lot of fun to bring everybody together. I don't know if it was luck or the gods just said, hey, this has been attempted a few times. It's just never happened. and it managed to all work out.
Divine intervention is a thing.
There you go.
Sometimes things happen for an absolute reason. Do you have a favorite story out of the lot of them? Walk me through. Actually, I'll tell you what. Before we do that, let me walk me through a couple of these stories, please.
Oh, okay. So I'll do the bookends. How about that? So, Curis, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but you'll probably be able to say it right. Abuto, Dr. Q.
Yep, Dr. Q.
Yes,
she's
Dr.
an
Q.
amazing person, by the way.
She is. We get together, but I call her by her real name when we see each other. So,
I think I've always just called her Dr.
around
Q.
a long time, but
Yeah.
I've just not, like I said, I didn't know anybody anymore. So she, her story, Witch of Dunlore, actually is the first one in the book. And here's the paperback version.
So that is a beautiful cover. Wow.
Right. I wanted elements of, this is, side portrait of a woman who has kind of got her hair in a bun with some elements of the stories in there. So Witch of Dunlore is actually based off of a folklore here in Charlottesville, Virginia, I believe. And if you look up Google Witch of Dunlore, you can read about, I think there's a picture of the old house there. Okay. But this story is, there's a scout leader that is out doing a little camping trip with, Boy Scouts or, similar type of thing in the woods. And he decides to tell his troop about a little tale and, ghost story, whatever. And then they're supposed to go to bed. But of course, these kids are, 10, 12 years old or whatever. And they go off and they go into the house and all kinds of horrors and discontent and horrible things happen. Of course. And, nobody leaves unscathed. How about that?
Yeah.
So, and then our other bookend, so I'll say that the last story is Joy and Our Patchwork Lady, and that one's by Rook Riley.
Okay.
And that is a story of vengeance, domestic violence. Woman is called to a friend's home and gets their child out of the, harm's way. The husband is abusive, but Joy is looking for it. Just had enough. Everybody's just had enough of this situation, and so she calls upon a spirit that is been kind of passed down generations after generation that will intervene in periods of crisis. But you have to ask a certain way. You have to perform the rites and the rituals in order for this,
of course,
person to come to your aid, and they will decide whether they will or will not. And so Joy seeks vengeance, and the Patchwork Lady obliges. So,
and I hope in some horrible, awful way.
It is. Yes.
So I actually wrote a story once. It's and I forget the name of it now. It's sitting in my work in progress file of short stories, and it's essentially a woman she's washing dishes, and as she's washing the dishes, she's thinking about her abusive husband and how he wants things a certain way, and how he wants dinner a certain way, served a certain way, and if there's not, there's repercussions. So I grew up in an abusive home, so these are the images sort of stick with you. Sure. And she goes to serve him dinner. She turns around and she had actually stabbed him to death already, and he was there just horribly, brutally dissected by her, and she serves him dinner, his dead corpse. I love the imagery. Anyway, okay, so how many?
You need to work on the finish. You need to work on the ending of that, and let's get that out there.
There's a couple elements of it I didn't like, because my original plan was to actually set it to song lyrics, but I I stepped back from that, and I'm like, I don't really like that too much because I wasn't getting a feel for it. Stuck. I don't know. Excuse me. And for our listeners out there, yes, I still have a bit of a cough because this cold won't go away. Well, the cold's gone, the cough remains.
I understand.
But oh yeah, it's awful. But the anyway, it's how the sausage gets made, as they say. I still need to go back and revise and rewrite and tweak it a little bit. I love the story because the imagery between doing the household chores exactly the way he wants them to, and they're all done exactly the way he wants them done. Yeah, well, but he pays for it.
I say good for
Okay. Oh, absolutely. Nobody ever should treat another human being that way ever, especially even somebody that you profess to love. That's not love. No. If you're in that relationship, any listener, please find help. So how many, you mentioned it, I think I missed it. How many stories and poems are in this work?
We have 19 stories, 19 short stories, and 7 poems.
And whoa, I know what I was going to ask before we started with the bookends. What's your favorite?
Oh, I can't
say a favorite.
I know it's asked me that. It's funny.
It's like picking a child.
I won't say any names or anything, but I did get an interesting request by I'll just say Hollywood. How about that? Because of the just I think the packaging of all women veterans caught their eye. They did review, they did decline, but it was just nice to be asked anyway.
Yeah.
But it's an eclectic mix. There are a few war stories, I guess, in there, but and there are just generic. The main thing of this was that every writer, everybody involved in the project had to be a military veteran, identify as a woman. So, but where they went with their stories, they didn't necessarily have to be military related. Some people are kind of mention, spouses or that kind of, they're connected to the military in some way.
Sure.
But just as I was asked in that inquiry to pick a favorite, I'm like, I picked them for the anthology. I can't pick a favorite out of all of that grouping. They're all special in their own way.
It's hard to do. Absolutely. And I know I personally, it's sort of like Dark Corners. It's like we pick a favorite.
Right. Yeah.
I wouldn't even pick my own story, to be honest. There's so many wonderful submissions that are made in these anthologies out there.
Right.
And of course, if you can pick up a charity anthology, you're supporting a great cause. So always pick up a charity anthology. Just saying.
That's right.
You'll get introduced to some of your new favorite writers. Well, yes, yeah. So when is it? When is this coming out?
So this comes out to the public April 4th. We ran a Kickstarter. So our Kickstarters, most of them, I have 3 stragglers who have not gotten back to me to be able to ship them. But Kickstarters all have their copies. So the public release is April 4th.
Okay.
And that is in, we have a regular hardcover. We had a limited edition. I would say it's not just Kickstarters because I do have some extra copies that'll be at AuthorCon.
Okay.
But there's a regular.
For me, please.
There you go. There's a regular hardcover that doesn't have a dust jacket and is not all 3D, magic on the front cover and the spine and stuff. So
very cool, very cool.
And we're doing a bunch of launch events and a Zoom launch party on the 4th. But then we're also doing Barnes and Noble, a few different locations. Book People Richmond, local authors, most of them have 4 to 6 folks that we're all going to come together for those events. So it's a lot of fun.
And AuthorCon, come see us all at AuthorCon.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm
around the
AuthorCon.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can get it at your
Mhm.
events. I'm assuming you'll launch on like Amazon and that kind of stuff August 4th as well.
Yes, yes, it's going to be
Okay.
out. It's with Ingram, so you can buy it at Barnes and Noble. You can buy it at Amazon. You can buy it on my website, Tenris One Press. I have it set up for pre-orders. It won't ship until I know a ship date will match the 4th, so I don't get in trouble with the big river there. Um,
Yeah.
but it's available everywhere that you can do your online shopping. It'll be available at a few probably Barnes and Noble Fredericksburg. Book People Richmond will have it. Some local shops.
Okay.
It's available everywhere for pre-order actually right now.
Cool.
Yeah.
I will make sure and get a link up on the screen somewhere, maybe over on that side. I'm pointing over
Okay.
to Sarah's side. We'll get it over there. Maybe floating above her head. I don't know. We'll
There you
see.
go.
Editors, deal with that, please. I say that, but I'm actually the editor, so I can do whatever I want. But we'll get it out there so people can see it and click on it and get it and love it and all that great stuff.
I agree.
Because and it's the veteran community is actually small. We're I think well, I want to say like 1.5% of the living population at any one time has served.
Right.
I believe it's
Well,
about right.
and one of the largest, I don't know if you can find a lot of information about women veterans and their status within the community on the National Veteran Organizations Association's page, and it's just nvf.org. But the demographic of women veterans and homelessness is drastically on the rise. And they tend to be a younger demographic than than male counterparts that are veterans. So we have a large group of mid to late 20s into again, go to the website to find out the age group that is really the demographic. We have a lot of women veterans now who are becoming homeless.
Yeah,
and that can be due to a number of things, trauma and dealing with their issues of PTSD or whatever the case may be. But the plight of women veterans is really a big concern, and that was one of the things was women veterans writing, editing, putting all of this together, the graphics, but also giving back to women veterans.
Yeah, so. And I know that I say this, and I'm not kidding. Most people would look at me and go, "You're out of your mind." No, most of my commanders in the Army, oddly enough, were women. I don't know why. It just happened to be
wow.
The luck of they were all. I can't think of a one that I didn't admire. One of my favorite ones is now a major general in Washington.
Wow.
Works for the National Guard Bureau. You see. You see it more and more that we have females in the military, and they're a very important part of our veteran fabric. And of course, growing. None of our and growing, absolutely. None of our veterans should ever be homeless. Particularly so, this rise in women homelessness is actually quite disturbing. It shouldn't be. This should never be the case. This is a problem we can easily solve.
I agree.
But yeah. Anyway, well, go out and buy the book. That'll help.
Go. That's right.
And well, Sirrah, thank you very much for hanging out with me today. I absolutely appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, I love it when I can bring my fellow HWA Virginia chapter members on, because it's literally the most fun. I need to put together a Halloween show and get a bunch of people on, but I have to figure out how to do that. So
that would be fun.
Hopefully soon. I think that'd be a good time. For you, my lovely, my wonderful watchers, I appreciate everything. Please hit that like button, because if you don't hit that like button, look, every time if you don't hit the like button, I'm telling you what, a fairy loses its wings and is crushed by a boot. I mean, please hit that like button. You do me a great service when you do that. Also, remember to send questions. I love it in the show when I get questions. That makes me happy. Or people you want to see. Please, I'm begging you, help me provide content. All right. Well, that's it for all things writing. Thank you very much, Sirrah, again, for coming on board. And everybody else, this is Brian, the writer for All Things Writing, signing off. This has been another amazing episode of All Things Writing. If you heard something that got your wheels spinning, check out the links in the show notes. Also, please follow the show and remember to leave those reviews. Those simple acts of kindness mean the world to us. Hop on over to briannowak.com, and that is Brian with a Y, and check out my latest novels. I'm on Amazon or wherever you buy your ebooks. And as a reminder, the music you heard on the show today was used under license from the artist Ryan Ancona. Thanks for listening to the show and have a blessed day.